Hayley Mills. Today, I want to take you back to the early 1960s and to introduce you to one of this country's most famous and successful child stars.
For a lot of people, Hayley Mills was the sweet, cheerful face of Disney in the 1960s. Yet, behind that famous smile was a young actress struggling with pressures few people ever saw. As we uncover what really happened behind the scenes, we'll explore the secrets she kept, the battles she faced, the expectations placed upon her, and the personal price she paid for growing up in the spotlight. The illusion of the perfect image. In the summer of 1961, movie theaters across America were packed with people going crazy over a catchy pop song called "Let's Get Together." The song was from the film The Parent Trap, where estranged twin sisters trick their divorced parents into falling back in love. But what people didn't know was 14-year-old Hayley Mills played the role of the twin sisters on her own, turning her into a global superstar overnight. To millions of fans, she seemed like the perfect example of a sweet, wholesome teenager. Parents loved her polite manners, and young girls wanted to dress just like her. From the outside, her life seemed almost perfect, but behind the scenes, things weren't quite as perfect as they seemed. The girl audiences saw on screen was more than just an actress. Walt Disney Studios had carefully built her image into a brand, turning her into one of the biggest young stars of the era. Disney spent small fortunes managing her public image, making sure she always projected pure innocence. While audiences saw a confident young star who seemed to have everything together, she often felt completely different behind the scenes. Years later, she admitted that watching her old movies felt strange because it was almost as if she were watching a stranger who looked exactly like her. The real struggle wasn't anything secret or scandalous. It was the pressure of constantly having to live up to the perfect image people had of her. Whenever she stepped outside, she was expected to smile, stay cheerful, and always seem happy, no matter how she actually felt. Expressing her emotions, whether it was anger, sadness, or confusion, was out of the question, because it could ruin the multi-million-dollar brand that the studio had built. Families everywhere held her up as the ultimate role model, completely unaware that the girl in the magazines was quietly suffocating under the weight of her own fame. The studio went to great lengths to protect the image it had created for her. Keeping that perfect public image came with a heavy price that the outside world wouldn't fully understand until many years later. Behind her trademark smile, she was dealing with serious health problems, painful experiences in her personal life, and a devastating financial betrayal that would eventually cost her the money she had earned as a child. The happy image audiences loved was only part of the story. Behind it was a young actress whose real life was far more complicated than anyone knew. Hollywood had created a carefully polished image around her, but the story behind it began long before she became a star. To understand how it all happened, we have to go back to the beginning. The pedigree of British stage royalty. Before she became a Hollywood star, Hayley Mills was born into one of Britain's most respected acting families. Her parents had already made names for themselves on the British stage, so acting was part of her world from the very beginning. Her father was Sir John Mills, one of the most celebrated actors in Great Britain, renowned for starring in timeless classics such as Great Expectations, and eventually earning an Academy Award. Her mother, Mary Bell, wasn't an actress, but made a name for herself as a talented playwright and novelist, while Hayley's older sister, Juliet, was beginning to make her own name on stage and screen. With so much talent under one roof, Hayley grew up surrounded by people who understood the demands of the entertainment world firsthand. Life inside the Mills household revolved around theater scripts, rehearsal schedules, and everything that had to do with acting. Despite the famous people who often visited their home, Hayley wasn't raised with the privileges or attitude that came with being part of a famous family. Her parents expected her to stay grounded, work hard, and follow the same rules as everyone else. To protect their children from the pressures of public life, they raised the family in the Sussex countryside, well away from the city life and the constant attention of the press. At 12, Hayley Mills had no desire to become an actress. She preferred riding horses, climbing trees, and playing outside, viewing acting as simply the family business. That changed in 1958 when director J. Lear Thompson visited her family home. While discussing a movie with her father, Sir John Mills, Thompson noticed Hayley playing outside and was immediately captivated by her energy. Initially, Thompson had been on the search for a young boy to star in his new film. Spotting Hayley changed everything in that moment. Without taking a single acting class, the girl playing in the garden was offered a starring role alongside her father. That single afternoon in the garden would launch her into a British crime thriller that caught the eye of the most powerful man in entertainment. The accidental debut in Tiger Bay. Hayley was cast as Gilly in the movie Tiger Bay, which was released in 1959. She played a spirited young girl who witnesses a deadly domestic dispute and finds herself caught up in the aftermath. Rather than turning the young sailor responsible over to the police, she becomes protective of him and goes to great lengths to keep him safe, even hiding the murder weapon and misleading the investigators. Working alongside her father gave Hayley a sense of familiarity, but she quickly showed that she could hold her own. Her performance ended up making a strong impression on everyone around her. Without formal acting lessons, 12-year-old Hayley nearly stole the spotlight from her adult co-stars. Audiences were captivated by her expressive eyes, natural presence, and emotional depth. Even with the film's dark material, her performance never felt forced. Critics worldwide took notice, and she won the BAFTA Award for Most Promising Newcomer. Proving her success went beyond being a famous child star. Word about this gifted young girl quickly traveled far beyond the United Kingdom. Tiger Bay did well internationally, putting the film in front of Hollywood executives who quickly began taking notice of Hayley. Soon, major Hollywood studio corporations were scrambling to find this young British girl to put her on a major film project. Watching the overwhelming reaction to her debut, Sir John Mills knew right then that his daughter could never return to her ordinary, quiet life on the farm. Meanwhile, one of Hollywood's most famous filmmakers had seen her performance, and he was about to make her an offer that would change her life. During that period, Walt Disney was actively expanding his studio beyond animated cartoons into major live-action feature films. He needed a fresh and young star to anchor his new slate of family movies. While in a private Hollywood screening room, Walt watched a print of Tiger Bay and immediately knew he found what he was looking for. Instead of sending low-level agents to negotiate, Walt handled the matter personally. He flew directly to London and invited Sir John Mills and his family to meet him at the upscale Dorchester Hotel. Walt was famous for his personal charm, and he quickly earned the family's trust. Before the afternoon was over, her parents signed an exclusive 5-year contract with Walt Disney Studios. Walt took a deeply protective interest in Hayley right away, treating her almost like family whenever she traveled to California. Her big break in Hollywood came in 1960 when she starred in Pollyanna. She played an orphaned girl, and she gave the role a warmth that made the character instantly memorable.
Hayley Mills, as English a teenager as it was possible to be, was swept away to California by Walt Disney to star in a sickly sweet movie called Pollyanna.
Her character popularized the famous Glad game, which quickly became a massive cultural trend across the United States. Families everywhere fell in love with her cheerful energy, and movie theaters packed in crowds week after week. Hayley's performance had clearly caught Hollywood's attention, and that recognition reached the Academy Awards. She received the Academy Juvenile Award, a special Oscar created to honor outstanding young performers. The award was presented by Shirley Temple, who had received the very first one years earlier. Hayley was still a teenager, but she had already reached a level of success most young actors could only dream of. By the time she was 14, Hayley was already one of the biggest young stars in the world. Her movies were making millions, and the studio was relying heavily on her success to keep audiences coming back. The quiet life Hayley had known in the English countryside was now a thing of the past. Now her life and routines were press tours, packed studio schedules, and cameras following her everywhere. She was one of Hollywood's biggest young stars, but her next role would push her in a completely different direction. The Parent Trap and the Duplicity. In 1961, she got a role in the movie The Parent Trap, and that project permanently changed her public image. The idea for the film actually began at Walt Disney's home. His wife, Lillian, had read an English translation of a popular German novel about identical twins who were separated at birth. She thought Hayley would be perfect for the role. especially because she could convincingly play both sisters. Walt took her advice, launching a production that would demand every ounce of the young actress's energy. Playing two characters in the early 1960s was far more complicated than it might look on screen today. There were no computer effects to make the process easier, so Hayley had to film each side of the scene separately using locked-off cameras and carefully planned shots. She often spent hours acting opposite an empty space, using small marks and pieces of tape around the set to make sure her two characters would line up perfectly when the footage was combined. The physical demands were equally intense. She spent hours in hair and makeup trailers, changing costumes and hairstyles multiple times a day to switch between the two roles. To make the characters feel distinct, the young English star had to master two separate American regional accents, using a polished Boston accent for Sharon and a more laid-back California accent for Susan.
This is how you knew me in The Parent Trap, or perhaps like this, but never like this. I'm Susan Henning, and I was the other twin in The Parent Trap.
To pull off scenes where the twins touched or stood side by side, the studio hired a talented young actress named Susan Henning to serve as her body double. Susan stood in for the alternate twin during over-the-shoulder shots and wide camera angles. Working so closely together created a strong, instant bond between the two teen actors. Away from the pressure of the movie cameras, Hayley and Susan became close friends as they spent their time together between filming setups. The movie even gave Hayley an unexpected hit outside the theater. In one of its most memorable scenes, the twins sing "Let's Get Together," and Disney released the song as a single. It caught on quickly, eventually climbing into the top 10 on the American Billboard charts. Moviegoers flocked to theaters, turning the film into one of the biggest commercial hits of the decade. The film was a massive triumph, but while audiences cheered for the twins' happy ending, Hayley's real life was fracturing into two brutal extremes. The film drew huge crowds and became one of the decade's biggest hits. Audiences left the theater celebrating the twins' happy ending, unaware that Hayley's own life was about to take a dark, unexpected turn. Hayley's life had started to feel like two completely different worlds. One was the glamorous side of Hollywood, where she traveled from country to country, stayed in expensive hotels, and walked into rooms filled with people who wanted her attention. Thousands of fans cheered for her, while powerful adults treated her opinions seriously because they knew her name could put people in theater seats. As soon as filming ended, that glamorous life was put on hold. Hayley would pack her bags and head straight back to a strict British boarding school, trading movie sets and adoring fans for school rules and a very different kind of routine. One minute she was in California, surrounded by people treating her like a celebrity, and the next, she was back at school, expected to live like any other teenager. At school, her fame didn't matter. She was expected to follow the same rules as everyone else, from the strict daily schedule to the uncomfortable uniform and endless restrictions. After spending her days being treated like a star, having so little control over her own life made the change even harder. School wasn't much of an escape from the attention either. Her classmates knew her as the girl they saw on the covers of magazines, and many of them simply didn't know how to treat her. Some were jealous of her fame and made hurtful comments, while others chose to leave her out altogether. Instead of feeling like an ordinary teenager at school, Hayley often felt like an outsider. She wanted nothing more than to fit in, make genuine friends, and be a regular teenager. To survive each day, she tried to keep her fame out of the conversation and simply act normal to everyone else. For a few hours each day, she wanted to forget that millions of people knew her name. Things became even more disturbing when a priest at the school, someone she should have been able to trust, abused his position and tried to take advantage of her by offering her a role in a school play. The encounter was terrifying, confusing, and deeply traumatic for a young girl who had grown up in a warm, protective household. Instead of telling anyone what had happened, she kept it to herself. She said nothing to her parents or to the studio executives in California. She feared that speaking up would cause a scandal, hurt her family, or create problems for the career so many people were counting on her to maintain. Keeping it to herself only made the gap between her public image and private life grow wider. On screen, she was still the cheerful young Disney star millions of families loved. But away from the cameras, she was a young woman carrying experiences she didn't know how to talk about and dealing with them largely on her own. As the internal pressure mounted to maintain her spotless image, her body began to pay a devastating physical price. The Hollywood pressure. The studio wanted Hayley to remain the sweet, innocent child audiences had grown to love. Her movies were making millions, so executives had little reason to change the formula. The problem was that Hayley was growing up, and by her mid-teens, it was becoming impossible to keep pretending she was still a little girl. Growing up became frightening for Hayley because so much of her career depended on the image of the innocent little girl audiences had come to love. As she got older and her appearance began to change, she couldn't help wondering whether the studio would still want her. The media only made things harder. Gossip columnists and newspaper writers regularly commented on her appearance, even pointing out every change in her weight. She couldn't escape those comments, and seeing people publicly criticize her body left her increasingly anxious about how she looked. Terrified of gaining weight, Hayley began taking drastic steps to control her body. She began making herself sick after meals, desperate to keep her weight from changing. What started as a quick way to control her weight grew into a severe secret battle with bulimia. For years, she managed to keep her eating disorder from the people around her. She would make herself throw up after meals. The people around her had no idea what she was dealing with when the cameras weren't rolling. Living this way created an overwhelming burden of shame and isolation. In the early 1960s, eating disorders were poorly understood and rarely talked about. Her parents, managers, and even doctors had far less awareness of what was really going on. And a teenage girl struggling with food could easily be dismissed as simply being picky or going through a phase. Without the support or guidance she needed, she had to deal with the problem largely on her own. Getting better was a slow process that took years, as she gradually learned to have a healthier relationship with food and with her own body. Years later, when Hayley finally spoke openly about what she had been through, many people could relate to her story. The pressure she described was surprisingly similar to what many young stars still face today. By talking openly about her past, Hayley showed that the pressure placed on child actors to look a certain way was nothing new. She had already spent years struggling with her own body. And now, as a teenager, Hayley was about to find herself at the center of a very public scandal. By the time she reached her late teens, Hayley felt completely trapped inside the squeaky clean persona Disney had built for her. She was determined to prove to the world that she was no longer a little girl they all saw on screen. In 1966, at 20 years old, she signed on to star in The Family Way, a British drama about the intimate struggles of a newly married young couple. The role was different from the project she was used to being in. It had more mature themes and a brief, controversial nude scene, which sent a clear message that she was stepping away from children's films for good. It was on the set of this movie that her life took a dramatic personal turn. She met the director of the film, Roy Bolting, who was a highly accomplished filmmaker, and the two had a secret romantic relationship. However, there was a huge problem. Bolting was 53 years old, which made him 33 years older than Hayley.
19-year-old Mills took up with Roy Bolting, the film's 52-year-old director. The affair made jaws drop, not only because of the couple's 33-year age difference, but also because Bolting was married with children.
To make matters even more complicated, he was still legally married to his third wife when their romance took off. When news of their private relationship leaked to the press, the media rounds went crazy. In no time, the story of the affair made its way to front pages around the globe with pictures of the innocent Disney darling alongside a married man who was old enough to be her father. Her fans were stunned, while conservative commentators expressed outrage over what they saw as the complete destruction of her wholesome image. Hollywood executives were deeply alarmed, fearing that her marketability would disappear overnight. Her own parents raised serious concerns, begging her to slow down and rethink a relationship that threatened to ruin her public standing. Rather than backing down under the intense outside pressure, Hayley chose total rebellion. She ignored the studio's warnings, turned away from her family's advice, and moved into Bolting's house. After his divorce was finalized, the two officially got married. To the public, it looked like a reckless scandal. But in reality, her decision was driven by the search for her own identity. After spending her entire youth following orders from film producers, her parents, and strict school rules, running toward an older man felt like her only chance to break free and take charge of her own life. That newly found freedom came with a dark side she did not fully understand at the time. Over time, she realized that escaping one controlling environment had simply pushed her into another. Eager to break free from the studio's control, she soon found herself in another difficult situation. Instead of having Hollywood executives make decisions for her, she was now dealing with an older husband who had a strong say in how she lived her life and made her choices. She thought her marriage would secure her independence, but a devastating legal discovery was about to strip away her entire life's work. The $17 million trust fund betrayal. During the years when Hayley was making hit after hit, she believed the adults around her were looking out for her future. Her parents and financial managers had set up a trust in Britain where her film earnings were supposed to be kept safe. The idea was to make sure the money she earned as a child would still be there when she was older. The money she earned from years of work was supposed to stay in that account until she became an adult. So when Hayley turned 21, she expected to finally have access to the money she had earned as a child. She had every reason to believe she was about to become financially independent. Instead of finding financial security, she received shocking news. Her life savings were virtually gone. By the time Hayley was old enough to access her earnings, a huge portion of the money she had made as a teenager had already gone to taxes. Britain was still dealing with serious financial problems after World War II, and the highest earners could face tax rates as high as 90%. Her father, Sir John Mills, had accountants handling her finances and tried to protect her earnings through a trust. Unfortunately, the way the trust was set up left her vulnerable to British tax laws, and a large share of the money eventually went to the government. Hayley wasn't willing to simply accept what had happened to her earnings, so she took the British Inland Revenue to court. She argued that the money she had earned as a child should not be taken by the government tax system she had no control over. The case dragged on for years, adding another source of stress to an already difficult period in her life. For a moment, it looked like Hayley might finally get her money back. A judge ruled in her favor, agreeing that the state had no right to take it. But the victory didn't last. Tax officials appealed the case to the House of Lords, and in 1975, the court overturned the earlier decision, leaving Hayley to accept that she would not recover the fortune she had earned as a child. The financial loss was enormous, as the government took roughly £2 million, worth more than $17 million in today's current rate. After years of working on film sets, Hayley was left with very little of what she had earned. Fame didn't pay her bills, and without much money to fall back on, she couldn't simply walk away from work or take time off. Even though Hayley was one of the most recognizable stars in the world, she still had to keep working to cover her basic expenses. She took whatever acting jobs came her way, and eventually turned to the stage, where she began rebuilding her career. She had no idea that another major challenge was still ahead of her: reinvention, resilience, and television success. With the money she had earned as a child gone, Hayley returned to the stage and took whatever roles she could find. She traveled around Britain, performing night after night and relying on theater to make a living. It was a far cry from the comfort and attention of her movie star years, but the stage gave her something she badly needed: steady work and the chance to build a career on her own terms. By the late 1980s, Hayley had an unexpected chance to return to American television. She was offered the lead in a new comedy series called Good Morning, Miss Bliss, playing Carrie Bliss, a middle school teacher trying to help her students navigate the ups and downs of growing up. The show aired on the Disney Channel and earned a loyal audience. Although the series ran for only one season, studio producers recognized the potential of the core idea. They revamped the format, moved the setting to a California high school, and rebranded the show as Saved by the Bell. The iconic teen sitcom went on to become a huge part of pop culture. all built directly on the blueprint introduced in Hayley's earlier show. Over the years, Hayley continued to take on roles that kept her working steadily, eventually finding a more settled life and career back in Britain. Then, in 2006, she joined the cast of Wild at Heart, a popular primetime drama filmed at a wildlife reserve in South Africa. She played Caroline du Plessis, a strong and caring woman, and stayed with the show for all 6 seasons. The role introduced her to a whole new generation of viewers and showed that she could still win over audiences long after her days as a child star were over. Her personal life also found a deep sense of peace. After her scandalous marriage to Roy Bolting in 1971, the two welcomed their son 2 years after. But unfortunately, in 1975, they separated and got a divorce in 1977 after noting she had grown up and now wanted to be with someone in her age bracket, which she did. A few months after her divorce, she started dating actor Lee Lawson, and a year later, they had a son. After 9 years, they split up, and almost after a decade, she found love again and married Indian-American actor Firdaus Bamji. Through all the changes in her career, Hayley always put her 2 sons, Crispian and Jason, first. She wanted them to have a more stable childhood than she had, away from the pressures that came with being in show business. Eventually, she built a quieter life in London and found a sense of independence that had been missing for much of her younger years. Her life had finally achieved a beautiful balance until a terrifying medical diagnosis threatened to take it all away. In April 2008, on the day she turned 62, Hayley learned that she had aggressive breast cancer in both breasts. She underwent surgery to remove the tumors and then began chemotherapy. During treatment, she kept her illness private, often wearing wigs to hide the effects of the chemotherapy. After 3 rounds, she decided to stop treatment and take a different approach, focusing on nutrition, meditation, and exercise, eventually winning her battle and earning a complete, clean bill of health. As she got older, Hayley decided it was time to tell her story in her own words. With help from her son Crispian, she wrote her memoir, Forever Young, published in 2021. Rather than dwelling on the people and circumstances that had hurt her, she looked back on her life with honesty and grace. Which Hayley Mills movie is your favorite? And did you know about the struggles she faced behind that famous smile? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the notification icon for more videos like this. Thanks for watching.